GraceandTruthRadio.world proudly presents Life Coaching for Men, improving their relationships with their wives and learning to communicate for a more fulfilling and satisfying marriage. And now, Men Loving Well, with Christian counselor, author, and relationship coach, Dr. Jim Slaughter.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for Men Loving Well. I want to read a psalm today to begin. The psalms were written, of course, thousands of years ago, but they are just as important and just as meaningful and just as much for us as they were for the people back then. This is Psalm 100, a psalm for giving thanks. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his people, and sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations. Thank you, Lord, for your never-ending faithfulness to us. And thank you for the wonder of these psalms. We ask you to impress them on us, and we thank you for what lies ahead for us today during our program. We trust you and we thank you for your presence here. Amen. We're going to talk today about how to love our wives well by listening to them. Not just hearing what they say, but hearing what they mean. And this is really the point of communication. Whenever I hear that word, communication, I think of what a friend and fellow professor of mine used to say: nothing is easier than talking. Nothing is harder than communicating. He's right, of course. To communicate, there must be certain things in place. We've got to have a sender. We've got to have a receiver. And, of course, there needs to be a message and a medium. But what really makes communication harder than talking is the fifth and most crucial component: understanding. If I don't understand what someone says to me, then I've missed the message, and real communication hasn't taken place at all. If I hear what my wife says but don't understand what she means, then we haven't actually communicated. But mixed messages are common. They happen every day. A woman wore a wool jacket to work one day and decided to get her car washed on the way home. Since it had warmed up outside, she slipped her jacket off while she waited for the car to be cleaned. The next morning, her jacket was nowhere to be found.
Maybe I left it at the car wash,
she thought, and she called the number.
Did I leave the burgundy blazer there yesterday?
She asked the young man, who answered. A minute later, he returned from checking. Sorry, ma'am, there's no burgundy blazer here, just a gray Bronco. Kind of a funny story, but it illustrates the point. It's just another in a long line of examples of how easy it is to miscommunicate. Happens all the time, especially in marriage. Men and women, as has been pointed out in lots of bestsellers, can communicate very differently. Sometimes it's almost as if they were from different planets. A survey of more than 1,000 married couples reported in U.S. News and World Report that, in general, we don't even talk about the same topics. The leading discussion subject reported for men was news events, talked about in the previous week by 71% of respondents, followed by work, 68%. The study found that women, on the other hand, talked about food, 76%, and health, 72%. Men were more likely to have talked about sports, 65%, to women's 42%. Women were more likely to have discussed personal matters, 52%, to men's 40%. Different conversational priorities can often lead to difficult communication. Whatever the topic, we have one thing in common. Both men and women depend on communication to keep their marital relationships running. It's the lifeblood of every marriage, really. Couples who can't communicate well, who don't speak clearly and listen carefully, soon fall apart. This brings up the conversation between a husband and wife at the kitchen table. She says to him,
I know you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant.
This is kind of a humorous conversation, but probably not too far from wrong. When you stop to think about all that's involved in getting your message across, it's apparent why misunderstandings often occur. Communication specialists point out that when you talk, there are really 6 messages that can come through. 1 is what you mean to say. 2 is what you actually say. 3 is what the other person hears. 4 is what the other person thinks he hears. 5 is what the other person says about what you said. And 6 is what you think the other person said about what you said. Discouraging? Pretty much. But it does illustrate why communication is often hard work. We want the other person not only to listen, but to understand what we mean. The old proverb, say what you mean and mean what you say, is a worthy goal, but not an easy one to achieve. If we want to communicate, we begin by listening more and talking less. There can't be strong lines of communication without real listening. By being quiet and listening to what our wife is saying, we're letting her know that we respect her and we value her. The conversation ends with her feeling those very emotions. She feels respected. She feels valued. The wife appreciates her husband when he genuinely considers her words and her ideas. I can't overemphasize the immense need we all have to really be listened to. One of the great listeners of modern times was Sigmund Freud. A man who met Freud described his manner of listening. He said, "It struck me so forcibly that I'll never forget him. He had qualities which I had never seen in any other man. Never had I seen such concentrated attention. His eyes were mild and genial. His voice was low and kind. His gestures were few. But the attention he gave me, his appreciation of what I said, even when I said it badly, was extraordinary. You've no idea what it meant to be listened to like that." This kind of listening provides a great model for me as a counselor and a coach. But Freud's manner speaks even more meaningfully to me as a husband. I want to have this manner about me when I listen to my wife. I want to concentrate my attention on her. I want to look at her through mild, friendly eyes and respond to her in a voice soft and kind. I want her to know that I appreciate everything she says. Now, the hard part is resisting the urge to interrupt. It's just the natural male intent to talk, not listen. We so often seem to want to add to or contradict. It's just hard for us to leave it alone and let our wife talk. Part of this is because we think mostly with the left side of our brain. We also think compartmentally and specifically. So it's just our natural tendency to want to fix things. So we're likely to want to give our wife advice from time to time, but when we do that, we ruin everything if we're trying to have a conversation and listen. She just wants me to listen. I'm often convicted by James 1:19 in the New Testament. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. Here the apostle echoes the words of Proverbs 18:13. He who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. And Proverbs 21:23. He who guards his mouth and his tongue keeps himself from calamity. President Abraham Lincoln learned the truth of this proverb the hard way. Lincoln could be outspoken and critical. As a young man in the Pigeon Creek Valley of Indiana, he not only criticized, but he wrote letters and poems ridiculing people and dropped these letters on the country roads where they were sure to be found. One of these letters aroused resentments that burned for a lifetime. Even after Lincoln had become a practicing lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, he attacked his opponents openly in letters published in the newspapers. But he did this just once too often. In the autumn of 1842, he ridiculed a vain, pugnacious politician by the name of James Shields. Lincoln ridiculed him, he jibed him, he kidded him through an anonymous letter published in the Springfield Journal. The town roared with laughter. Shields, sensitive and proud, boiled with indignation. He found out who wrote the letter, leaped on his horse, started after Lincoln, and challenged him to fight a duel. Lincoln didn't want to fight. He was opposed to dueling, but he couldn't get out of it and save his honor. He was given the choice of weapons. Since he had very long arms, he chose cavalry broadswords, and he took lessons in sword fighting from a West Point graduate. And on the appointed day, he and Shields met on a sandbar in the Mississippi River, prepared to fight to the death. But at the last minute, their seconds interrupted and stopped the duel. That was the most lurid personal incident in Lincoln's life. It taught him an invaluable lesson in the art of dealing with people. Never again did he write an insulting letter. Never again did he ridicule anyone. And from that time on, he almost never criticized anybody for anything. Lincoln had learned the value of silence. When we resist the urge to talk and decide to listen to our wife, we're really deciding to lay aside our own ego. Our objective here is not to look powerful or smart or informed or clever. It's to connect with her and to offer her what she needs most from us at the time. Not answers, but understanding. When we receive and accept our wife's message and understand what she really means, we can go further than saying, "I hear you." We can say, "I hear what you mean." The best way to communicate when we're talking to our wife and seeking to listen and understand what she means is called active listening. And we want to talk about that for a little bit. To listen actively, we have to purposefully engage. This means our full attention has to be on our wife. We must show genuine interest in her. First, make eye contact with her. Look into her eyes to connect with her. The eyes are the most expressive part of our bodies. When you look into your wife's eyes, you connect with her in an intimate way. By doing this, you show her you're listening and that you are interested. Second, focus your attention. Think just about her and what she is saying. This can be hard for guys because of that compartmental left brain thinking that we do. We'd rather move out of the being compartment, that is relating, and into the doing compartment, that is fixing. In light of that, we remember to put our phone on silent, and if it rings, we ignore it. We look into her eyes and we listen to her. She is our highest priority. Now, after showing our wife genuine interest by getting eye contact and focusing on her, we encourage her to talk, and we do this in several ways. First, don't interrupt. Active listening means that when my wife is talking, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say when she pauses. We're totally tuned in to her and what she's saying. Then what we're after is to receive and accept the message she sends, to understand what she really means. So we don't interrupt. Second, we also encourage her to talk by affirming her. You can do this in a number of ways. A nod of your head can do it, to agree with what she's saying or to show that you understand. You can say, "You did a good job with that," or "I really appreciate that," or "Thank you for talking with me about this," or "Thank you for talking to me about this." Number 3, validate her concerns, her goals, her values, her beliefs, and her feelings. Those things may be different from yours, but allow her the luxury of having her own. She has a right to them. Number 4, clarify for understanding. You can say, "Tell me more about that," or "What did you mean by whatever it was?" or "So what you're saying is," and so you restate. But here's a tip to avoid. Avoid why questions, because why implies judgment or criticism. Which brings me to the final point, which brings me to the next point in encouraging our wives to talk. Number 5, put yourself in her shoes. Look at things from her perspective. Sam Douglas of Hempstead, New York, used to tell his wife that she spent too much time working on their lawn, pulling weeds, fertilizing, cutting the grass twice a week, when the lawn didn't look any better than it had, from his perspective anyway, than when they moved into their home 4 years earlier. Naturally, she was distressed by his remarks, and each time he made those remarks, the balance of the evening was ruined. One day, Mr. Douglas realized how foolish he'd been all those years. It never occurred to him that she enjoyed doing that work, and she might really appreciate a compliment on her diligence. One evening after dinner, his wife said she wanted to go pull some of the weeds and invited him to keep her company. He first declined, but then thought better of it, and he went out after her and began to help her pull the weeds. She was visibly pleased, and together they spent an hour of hard work and pleasant conversation. After that, he often helped her with the gardening and complimented her on how fine the lawn looked. What a fantastic job she was doing with a yard where the soil was like concrete. The result? A happier life for both, because he had learned to look at things from her point of view, even if the subject was only weeds. When you see things from her vantage point, they may just look a little different to you. Number 6, and finally, don't judge. Just listen. I want to highlight this point with another lesson from Lincoln. The Battle of Gettysburg was fought during the first 3 days of July 1863. During the night of July 4th, Lee began to retreat southward while storm clouds deluged the country with rain. When Lee reached the Potomac with his defeated army, he found a swollen, impassable river in front of him and a victorious Union army behind him. Lee was in a trap. He couldn't escape. Lincoln saw that, and that this was a golden, heaven-sent opportunity, the opportunity to capture Lee's army and end the war immediately. So with a surge of high hope, Lincoln ordered Meade not to call a council of war, but to attack Lee immediately. Lincoln telegraphed his orders and then sent a special messenger to Meade, demanding immediate action. And what did General Meade do? He did the very opposite of what he was told to do. He called a council of war in direct violation of Lincoln's orders. He hesitated. He procrastinated. He telegraphed all manner of excuses. He refused point blank to attack Lee. Finally, the waters receded, and Lee escaped over the Potomac with his forces. Lincoln was furious. "What does this mean?" Lincoln cried to his son Robert. "Great God, what does this mean? We had them within our grasp. We had only to stretch forth our hands, and they were ours. Yet nothing that I could say or do would make that army move. Under the circumstances, almost any general could have defeated Lee. If I'd gone up there, I could have whipped him myself." And in bitter disappointment, Lincoln sat down and wrote General Meade this letter. And remember, at this period of Lincoln's life, he was extremely conservative and restrained in his words. So this letter, coming from Lincoln in 1863, was tantamount to the severest rebuke. Lincoln writes, "My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. If you could not safely attack Lee last Monday, how can you possibly do so south of the river, when you can take with you very few, no more than 2/3 of the force you then had in hand? It would be unreasonable to expect, and I do not expect that, you can now effect much. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it." What do you suppose Meade did when he got that letter? Well, Meade never saw that letter. Lincoln never mailed it, and it was found among his papers after his death. I thought about this, and it's only a guess, but I imagine that after writing that letter, Lincoln looked out the window and said to himself, "Maybe I shouldn't be so hasty. It's easy enough for me to sit here in the quiet of the White House and order Meade to attack. But if I had been up at Gettysburg, and if I had seen as much blood as Meade, during that last week especially, my ears had been pierced with the screams of shrieks and wounded and dying, maybe I wouldn't be so anxious to attack either. If I had Meade's timid temperament, perhaps I would have done just what he did. Anyhow, it's water under the bridge now. If I send this letter, it will relieve my feelings, but will make Meade try to justify himself. It'll make him condemn me. It'll arouse hard feelings. It'll impair all his further usefulness as a commander, and maybe even force him to resign from the Army. So Lincoln put the letter away, because he learned by bitter experience that sharp criticisms and rebukes almost invariably end in futility. Judgment and criticism are a fool's response that almost always makes enemies. The last thing we want when we listen to our wife. This is where Proverbs 18:2 is convicting. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. We don't judge or fix. We hear and understand. So, men, if you and your wife seem to have a hard time communicating, could it be that some basic rules of active listening might make it better? Hear her meaning, not just her words. Make an effort to understand. Make direct eye contact with her. Focus your attention on her. Avoid distractions. Don't interrupt. Affirm her. Validate her concerns, her goals, values, beliefs, and her feelings. Clarify for understanding when necessary. Put yourself in her shoes and don't judge, just listen. Here's a P.S. I wanted to add at the end of our program today. And I wonder if you've ever been infected with what one person has called hurry sickness. I never thought about the sickness of hurry before, but boy, it's a reality in our lives, probably in yours as well. We have been infected with that disease from time to time, Anne and me as a couple, and most couples we know have combated it as well. And that's one of the reasons pillow talk can be so important in the life of a married couple. See, bedtime forces you to slow down a bit. Even as you get under the covers, you begin to breathe more deeply and slowly. Your body temperature drops slightly and your heart rate and blood pressure go down. Muscles relax. Your metabolic rate slows down too. Falling asleep actually is God's plan for helping you conserve energy and refuel your tank. So as you hit the sack tonight, take a moment to savor the change in your pace. Notice your body's desire to submit to this antidote to stress and hurry. Talk to each other about your busy day and listen to each other slowly. If you're looking for something to talk about, explore what the two of you might do to schedule a downshift in your schedules. This is a perfect topic for pillow talk. Considering what you can do to live a more balanced life is more productive when you're relaxing. Making specific plans and working on schedules is better left to the early, more productive times of the day. But as you're edging toward sleep, explore how you might like to change the pace.
Thank you again for joining us. Men Loving Well airs live every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Central Time on graceandtruthradio.world. If you would like to contact or coach with Dr. Jim Slaughter, reach out to him on Facebook.com, Living Well Show. Email him at jslaughterphd@yahoo.com or contact him at his clinic, Life Solutions, 817-232-1363. We look forward to seeing you again next week here on Men Loving Well.
Life Solutions Coaching and Counseling in Fort Worth, Texas is a full-service wellness clinic providing individual, group, and family counseling, one-on-one coaching for life and wellness, and naturopathic treatments of medical massage therapy combined with essential oils to ensure you reach your health and wellness goals. Sessions are available in person or by phone. Get started on your new life today. Just call 817-232-1363 or go to lifesolutionscoachingandcounseling.com or email them at lifesolutionscc@yahoo.com.